Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Lean Walseth, and I am the Theater Education Specialist here at the Perpich Center for Arts Education. Thank you so much for taking some time on a Tuesday in August, when I know you all have a lot going on and it's really hot in here. Thank you for bearing with us. Thank you for being here for our Native Authors Book Fair. This is part of a series that we have been doing for 2 years. If you look on the back of this handy handout with that QR code, you'll see a lot of the authors that we have been talking to over the past couple of years. Interviews with them are on our website. So much great work, and we said we want to have a fair to celebrate multiple authors at the same time. So some of our authors are with us making a repeat appearance, and some are new to us. We are so thrilled to have them here, and we are thrilled that you are here to join us. We are going to keep intros really pretty short today because we don't have a ton of time. We have 40 minutes and we have so many fabulous authors with us, and we want to give them as much time as possible to tell you about themselves and about their work, so you get to know a little bit more about the context. Hopefully everybody got this handout when you came in. If you didn't, there's plenty extra out there at the front table. This has complete bios for you, so we're not going to read all the bios, but I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves this morning. So you can just share with us your name, any other things that you would like to share in a way of a greeting, and then we've asked them all to bring one book with them, and so they might introduce their book real quick as well as we go down the row. So Kiki, can we start with you? And you can feel free to grab that microphone right there. There you go. And we might have to share some microphones, so we'll just pass them as we need to. Welcome.
Bonjour, Garcia. They got because you go play to go Kiki, Garcia, and that's how can I introduce when I want us to see the daddy, but that was the ficDonal. Hello, my name is Western Sky Woman. My English name is Kiki Garcia, and I'm a member at Bad River, and my clan is Bald Eagle.
Wonderful, thank you for that beautiful greeting. Do you want to tell us about the book that you brought up as well?
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to hold it up for you while you just tell us the title, and maybe like a sentence about this one.
It's Fishing by Torchlight, and it's about 3 friends who go spearfishing and use kindness and humility.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Nice. Oh yeah, and Kiki, would you mind sharing? Thank you so much.
Bonjour, Genoa. In s'appelle moi tout monsieur Dominico. Mais qu'est-ce que tu dis que mais das manche ja dans way magan, moi, dans way magnates. A Chico, we got chent and Chipejan no come. Sabi ko na sa guy kaning manche bawan dans way magna. Vida shnopom ninda ishkaba Pacific. Chico again we went down kana kido nom oma nidwin. Wish be engaging. So that's how you say what's up in Ojibwe. There may have been 1 or 2 other words. Yeah, I'm Nicholas DeShaw. I'm Bois, Forte, Ojibwe. I'm also Eagle Clan, so which I was saying that makes her my younger sister. And which is one of the beauties of our ways of understanding relatives, is when you meet someone of your clan, even if you've never met them or you're from very different places, they are still your immediate family. That's something I always value. And I wrote this book, Loaf the Cat Goes to the Powwow.
Thank you so much. Oh no.
I'll just keep talking then.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Thank you both for your beautiful language. We'll keep moving on down.
Ujuka Kanawia, Nesoga Bokwe, Deshnikaz, Muskabakang, and Dunchba, Megazi, and Dodenge.
The 3 eagles up here.
Right. Something's about to go down, we're not sure.
Some good fish nearby, probably.
Melody Montano, I'm a member of the Redcliffe Band of Spiro Ojibwe, and I am one of the co-authors of EducaDon, which we brought here today, and I'll let Evan say a little bit more about it, other than me just saying the title, but the one thing is we do a lot of research on fire and also advocacy for the return of fire, especially fire being a spirit and a relative of ours as Ojibwe people. And so in honor of EducaDon, we, among many other efforts, we decided to write a children's book also to help get the voice into the minds and hearts of the young people, but we've also learned that it ended up being a book for all ages too, so.
Hi everybody, my name is Evan Larson. I am not indigenous to this place. My ancestors are from Scandinavia, Germany, England. I grew up in Malacca, north of here a little ways, and definitely the land has seeped into me a bit. But I'm super thrilled to share this stage with such amazing people, and it's been an incredible collaboration with Melanie and a whole bunch of other people who have expressed intense patience and generosity throughout the whole process of kind of bringing understandings together. And I like trees a lot, and tree rings, and so I'm really excited. It was a dream of mine to have a children's book with trees and fire, and all of a sudden I realized, Melanie, you help my dreams come true. Thanks. Good question.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you all for bringing who you are to this space. Your languages, your vulnerability, naming where you come from, all of that context is so important. Thank you. I think a lot of our hope for these conversations with our authors is to help give you some context and get to know them a little bit better and their work and their process. Ideally, you're bringing their books into your classrooms and your libraries and helping students learn about them and have a broader audience. And I think it's always nice to know something about where they came from and the authors that they came from as you're talking about that. So I wondered if we could start by having you each tell us a little bit about where you grew up, kind of where you come from, and how you got started writing. And we can just kind of go in the same order or whatever, however people are feeling so moved.
How'd you grow up?
I grew up in St. Paul and West St. Paul. I first started writing books when I was really young, and I always liked to make up stories about almost anything. I would always want my dad to read me books, and I would always like to. I was really little and I would never understand the words, but I would always like to, I was very curious about the words, and I didn't know what they meant, but I was really curious about them, and I always like to come up with any story that I had in my mind, and whenever I got a pen or a paper or markers, I would always try to write a story.
I have follow-up questions for you, but we'll get back to that later. Thank you.
I'm just trying to be Kiki when I grow up. So I grew up in Michigan, actually. Like I mentioned, my family's Bois, Forte, Ojibwe, which Tower area right on the Canadian border up there. And actually, we were Canadian before they kicked us out of Voyageurs National Park and then said, "You're American Indians now." I'm like, "Oh, okay." A lot of my life has been an effort to return to that part of where my family came from, because the way I grew up, we had knowledge of our ancestry, but it was more like a quirk of, that's kind of neat, huh? Anyway, what's for dinner? And it was manuman, it was wild rice, which was another kind of thing I had in connection. So I came to Minnesota to do my bachelor's degree in 2008, and I've been working very hard to learn language and embrace culture. And I really wanted to, I can talk about my book a little bit later, but I really wanted to create a book that was a little bit of a glimpse into contemporary part of indigenous cultures. And I thought, what more than powwow? And something that's pretty approachable and pretty visible and still a lot of fun. But also could be a story that Native kids could see themselves in, but non-Native kids could too. So we kind of have two perspectives in the story between Loaf and Charlie. And I know I answered a little more than you asked, but yeah, it's a little bit fun.
Thank you. Beautiful. And that's always fine if you add more than just what the question is. I love it.
Careful with that. I mean, you said we only have 40 minutes.
We got 40 minutes, people.
That reminds me of a story.
May one job. So I grew up on the Red Cliff Ojibwe Reservation, very top of Wisconsin, majority of my life. We moved away just a few years and then back 2 different times, I believe it was total. But basically, again, majority of my life I was there. So grew up with a pretty cultural-based lifestyle, spearing, trapping, gathering, all those kind of fun things. And also grew up with a direct connection to fire, being an integral part of our ceremonies. And so fire was always around me. However, what wasn't always around me was the use of fire as a land management tool, and so I wasn't able to be around doing prescribed burns or things like that, even though, again, fire was always a part of our ceremonies, and that's because of the criminalization of fire in the early 1900s, pushing us away from being able to do that. But what I did grow up around was a lot of oral history and a lot of oral stories that talked about the memory of our people being able to use fire and being able to gather berries as a result. And a lot of times it was berry picking and then setting fire to a landscape before leaving. And so my relationship has been an evolving one, and knowing, just getting to know fire the older I get in all sorts of different ways. So I consider myself a student of fire. And again, this book is just one of the things that we're working on. But it's definitely, you know, thinking about oral history, it's definitely one of the things that we thought about growing up is when do we actually write some of these things down? And so I used to do a lot of journaling when I was growing up, mostly poetry and just kind of reflection on dreams and things like that. But it wasn't until the writing of this book that I was actually involved in writing an actual book that you end up seeing on the shelves, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I grew up in Malacca, as I mentioned, and I ended up going to college out on the West Coast at a little tiny school called Willamette University, and that was where I got introduced to tree rings as a science, and so that kind of pulled me out of my, at that time, goal of becoming a 3rd grade teacher, and swept me down this path of undergraduate research and then grad school, and all this while I was working with fire from that perspective, and I had grown up helping to burn my family's meadow and things like that. And over the years and years of doing this work, it's been really just, when I reflect on it, just amazing to see how it was definitely the knowledge and stories that were carried by the trees that helped me come to a different understanding than when I started. And Melanie and I connected by way of Robin Kimmerer, who wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and you knew her because you're awesome, and I got a happy chance to meet her when she came to UW-Platteville, where I work, to give a lecture, and we were working on a project. We were going to go up to Lac La Croix First Nation in Canada, and Robin was going to go with, and she said, I can't go because of my family, I got to take care of some stuff, but maybe Melanie can go. And so we had crossed paths once at that point, and then that trip up to Lac La Croix really kind of solidified that collaboration, and this story has just been a part of that ever since. And what I really love, and it's so appropriate that Robin was the one that kind of connected us in that way, is that inside this book, you get multiple perspectives kind of woven together, and I think in that way it really does a great job of bringing us to kind of where we are right now with fire, having to learn how to live with it well, and how complicated that is, and how relevant and important all of these different ways of knowing that.
Beautiful, thank you. Is that the person that you were talking about that was outside the door, or just someone, maybe someone else?
No, it was not, but
Okay.
it was funny because as I was telling the story of where I grew up and how we moved away from the res a couple times, when we moved away once, we moved to this little town called Phillips, Wisconsin, which was extremely racist at the time when I was young. But there were a couple other Native families. One was my uncle's family, and one was the McCormicks, and that was the McCormicks outside the door. And as I was sitting there, like, explaining that I moved away a couple times, I was like having these images of growing up with that family and just like how grateful I was that I knew another Native family. And look out the door, and I'm like, they run the world.
Yeah. That is magical, and beautifully echoes, I mean, what you were talking about with relationship, right? And your, the content of your books was sort of grew out of relationship with people, that you maybe didn't even know when you started that was going to be the pathway. You've already beautifully all segued a little bit into our next question, which is about where do you get your idea for your books, and you started to talk about that. I'm wondering if you might want to talk about the book that you have in front of you, where exactly that idea came from. You've given us some of this context already, but the particular spark, if you will, for the book, and or I'm just noticing the beautiful illustrations, like the content of the book, like how you decided the format that you were going to frame it in, whether like kind of aiming at children's or picture book, and how that came about in addition to that idea and the content. So how did you think about writing this book? How did you get this idea, Kiki?
I always liked spearfishing with my dad and the Boys and Girls Club up in Bad River in Redcliffe. I thought, why not make a story about treaty rights, and they should go spearfishing, and they should teach one of the two of the seven grandfather teachings, which is love and kindness and humility. And I thought that would be good because it's not just that you're just saying that they're being kind or humility. You're saying that when you're doing something like that, it can turn into a bigger story and a bigger meaning.
That is so gorgeous. Are you sure you're just 10? Sure. That is so deep. And you already knew about the seven grandfather teachings and really wanted to base it on those values. Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Gotta follow that. I was excited to be on panel with Kiki, but also very intimidated. Kind of was touching on a little bit, like a lot of times what I notice in stories that involve Native characters, they're set in the past. They're in 1850, stuff was happening. And it's like, okay. But I really want to bring things contemporary. Like, what's something you might see today? What's something a Native person, a Native kid might experience today and might know about? And so that was a big inspiration for this. I was kind of starting to get serious about my writing, and things were kind of, starting to happen a little bit. My wife and I were just hanging out one time before 4 kids. So much time then. And I was kind of encouraging, hey, maybe you think about writing a story, I don't know. Come on, let's think of a character. What's a character you want? I don't know, Loaf the cat. And because that was a nickname for her cat, whose name was Sophia, and she called her Loaf. It was like a little cute pet name for a pet. Pet name. And so I was like, okay, what's Loaf like? And just through describing that, we wrote what would become the first 3 pages of this book. And so I wanted to create something that would be really relatable in multiple ways. A lot of people like cats. So I felt that would be a good view into contemporary Native culture for maybe people who weren't familiar with Powwow, weren't familiar with Native contemporary culture anyway. But also for Native kids who might be growing up going to Powwow. My son is a Powwow dancer, and he's the first one in our family in at least 4 generations. And that's something we're really proud of for him. And but now he can see himself in this story. And fortunately there's more and more things. There's not enough. But that was kind of the hope here. I really am a big believer in representation in media. And that's always a big part of what I'm trying to do with any kind of work that I'm creating, is think about am I giving good representation? Who will see themselves in this? Who needs to see themselves? And who needs to see someone they haven't seen before in this kind of format? So I thought a picture book was a really great route to do that. It's such a visual medium, and it's also what got picked up. So yeah, the effort to not go on too long. That's kind of how I approach these things.
Beautiful, so well said, thank you. Melanie, your advent.
So So I'll go first. This has been a really collaborative effort in so many ways. And this is our first book ever, both of us. And as an academic, I've written a lot of like scientific papers, but that's a very different thing, different process. And it was after I had first met Robin, and we had this great conversation about how she was working on. She actually wrote an essay about her perspective on Denver chronology. It's in the Mind of Plants. It's awesome. I laugh out loud when I read it. It's just like brilliant and beautiful. And but she was trying to. We're having a conversation about how do you give voice to plants for those who can't hear it and have them still not think they're crazy. And that idea had trickled through, and I was actually driving across the driftless area down in southwest Wisconsin to get a haircut, because my friend is a potter and she makes money by cutting hair and then does potting on the side, and pottery on the side. And I was driving along, and all of a sudden I was thinking about that conversation, and it just kind of like dove in, and the framework of the story kind of all poured into my head at that one time. So I got to her studio, haircut place, salon, and I said, "Hey, Christy, can I write something down real quick?" And so I got out my notebook and I wrote down. And then I sat in the chair, and she said, "What were you writing on, Evan?" I was like, "Well," and I started to tell her, and I just started weeping. The importance of the story really hit, and how it is this interesting mix of both tragedy and awful injustice and really beautiful recovery and healing. And so I get through this, and I'm just sobbing, and she's like, "Wow, Evan, that sounds like a children's book." And so here we are. But I did reach out to Robin because it didn't feel right, because it didn't feel like it was my story. I can help translate the stories of trees because that's what I do, but like this is so relevant in so many ways. And so it was through kind of like trying to understand, and it was years from that moment to where finally a grant proposal from the Sea Grant program in Wisconsin came out, and Melanie and I and Robin got on the call and said, like, let's go for it. And that's when we finally formalized our effort to create the children's book. That was the start. There was so much more to it. And so I'll hand it off to Melanie now. You can tell the story about that happy conference.
Or I'll say that one thing that's different about this story is that there's a story within a story too. So the story within the story is something we talk about Ondag, the crow who brings fire to the Anishinaabe people. And with that story, that's something that many of us have heard growing up, and we've heard different versions of it. But one thing I wasn't sure if that was one of them that could actually be written down, and mostly because I hadn't seen it written down elsewhere, but I had heard that many other Native communities share a similar version of that story, or maybe it's a different being. So I went to one of our many teachers, Anton Schroyer, and asked him if it was, acceptable through his eyes to be able to write that story down, and he had said, because he's one of them who has told them to us a lot of times in one of our medicine lodges, and he had said that story isn't mine, and it isn't, many individuals. Instead, that story is for the people to be able to learn that story and to be able to understand the deeper meaning of it. And he said that it was definitely something that we could write down. And he had also done a small video on it as well, talking about it. And so we had decided that it fit perfectly, but it also helped to connect people to the importance of fire in a different way, in a little bit more of a deeper cultural way. And it's interesting again, because that's one of the reasons why this is not just a children's book, but it's a book for all ages. And hopefully if people do shed tears while reading it, they're good tears. Because one thing that we're learning through this process is the more that we put effort into returning fire, the more tears we're shedding, and the more healing is happening both on the land and within people. And that's one thing that we have hoped to put into this book, is just words of healing and the importance of returning to cultural ways, and the importance of story itself and teaching through story.
Whew. Now you're getting me. Mary knows I'm a crier, so I'm going to try to hold it together. But just thinking about the healing power of tears when you're talking about fire, right? And it's just really powerful. Again, without even knowing it, you've already brilliantly segued into the next question, which is...
That's why we're pros.
Yeah. What you hope audiences will take away when they read your book, but hearing each of you talk, whether it's about the 7 grandfather values or having people, Native people feel reflected and represented, or non-Native people learning more about Native people and culture that they might not have known, or people learning about fire and the importance of this work with prescribed burns and the healing of the land. You were kind of talking about whose story is it and who has the right to tell it, and so I often wonder about that as well. And I think a lot of times when people engage this work, especially if they're not Native, there's that concern of how do I come to it, how do I hold it authentically, respectfully, how do I share it, what do I need to know beforehand. So I'm curious, like, what you hope will come out of it, but also if you could put together like a little contextual package or note, like what would you want people to know as they pick it up or as they share it with their students or in their libraries or in their spaces? That's kind of a lot of questions. But if anybody feels like, so what kind of comes with the book that you would want to give people with, and then what do you hope that they leave with after reading it? You can start on that end.
I'll give a very short, brief answer. Cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation. So that's one thing I hope that, when people pick up this book, it's more of a cultural appreciation and know that you're definitely welcome to share the story that's within this book, because again, it's written down, and so then therefore it's kind of for all.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, an adage I've heard a lot lately, which I really believe in, is nothing about us without us. So I was a teacher for many years, and I get that question a lot.
What did you teach?
What did I teach? I was licensed in high school or in secondary social studies. I taught there. Later on, I got a second license in K through 12 PE, so did that. Did a stint in preschool, so I a lot of stuff. Taught language, taught Ojibwe for a little while. But one thing I just really encourage is something like this, where we have a collaboration that's like a really respectful approach of someone knows what they're talking about, who has that knowledge, who has that expertise, and knows how to share it in a good way. Bring in those voices, because like I think one thing I hear is like, I don't want to do it wrong. I'm like, okay, then don't do it, because there are people who already have done it. So bring in their content. Bring them in. I'm available for school visits. But actually do that, because that's really powerful to have people come in and to share a perspective that, like, maybe you don't have, you can't have. I even go, like, sometimes I get reached out to, like, oh, can you do this work? We want to tell, like, there's this nation on the Northwest who is doing this thing with salmon. We wanted to, like, have a story kind of related to salmon and water. I'm like, I'm not from here. That's not my nation. I can't tell that story. And I've had to turn around good paying opportunities for that sometimes, but because I don't want to take in something that I can't do. And even for what to take away from my story, I mentioned a lot of it, but just like there's small things. One thing I try to mention, and I find Anishinaabe people tend to notice this, which I really appreciate because it was really intentional. First of all, like when I created this, it's a fun little kid story. It's pretty light overall. I was sweating bullets over so many parts of it in trying to make sure I was being culturally correct. And I've been a powwow drummer. I've been at powwows for most of my life. And I'm like, I don't want to get this wrong. And I was reaching out to my relatives and friends, like, is this okay? Can I do it like this? Does this sound all right? And they were like, yeah, that sounds fine. So just like you said, like, even within our community. But then even taking it a little further and potentially, like, in this story, it's from Loaf the Cat's perspective, but Loaf never talks. And that's very intentional. Because in Anishinaabe tradition, the only stories where animals talk are very specific kinds of stories. Their stories are only to be told at a certain time in a certain way, and to communicate, very important things. So it's not just like a cute, cartoony story. So that was another thing that was like, maybe a small thing, but something I tried to include in there. So a little summary: nothing about us without us, and reach out, because there's a lot of folks who very much want to share and have a lot of great things to bring to you, your libraries, your classrooms, or whatever group you're trying to work with.
That was a very good because when I saw it, I was like, I always really like cats. Like I like cats better than dogs, and I have a lot of cats. So when I saw this, I was like, it's very original story, and I think you did a good job because a lot of them focused on not ordinary stuff, but this is out of the ordinary, and I really like it.
I think you need to take Kiki with you on all of your adventures. Yes. I love it.
What I want people to think about when they hold this book, that they for non-native or native, it's this history and culture is for everyone. And when they read it, you could be any race, any color. It doesn't matter. It's for everyone.
I love that so much. And do you hope after they read it, do you hope that like people will change their mind about something, or that they might do something differently after they've read your book?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I just want to show it again. Look at that. I love that. And the illustrator, do you know the illustrator?
DeShaw.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you work with her to help figure out what the images were going to look like?
Betsy and Tom did that.
Yeah. Awesome. That's so great that you have a good team. And you are a good teammate as well, I can tell. Yeah. Amazing. We have about 10 minutes or so left, so I want to make sure that we get to some of your questions. I have more, y'all, but I would love to open it up. I think, Mary, do you have a mic? So she's got a mic over here, so if you have a question, if you just raise your hand, Mary will run, and maybe Tony, I can't tell, no? Okay. We'll run a mic over to you, and we'll open it up for conversation. If not, I can keep going, but I want to
Can
make
I
sure.
jump in one?
Yes, please.
This is the family right here that I was referring to that walked in.
The McCormick family.
I literally, because I was talking about how we moved off the res a few times, and to Phillips, of course, is one of them, and I'm like one of the only a few Native families, and I had the McCormick, so I was going to be okay.
Thank you for being here. How cool. So we're just raise a hand if you have a question or a comment. I see maybe a hand over here. Middle. And thank you for using the microphone. It just helps for accessibility purposes.
I have a question for Kiki specifically. Sorry, I love learning from all of you guys and hearing your stories, but us group over here, we have a lot of elementary school librarians.
You know the real star of the show. It's all good.
And we've got a lot of students just your age, and I want to see if you had any advice for other kids that wanted to write a story.
When I wanted to publish it, I knew it was going to be hard, but it paid off because I met so many great people, and I think if you think you can do something, you can do it because you are the only person that can say that you can do it because you can.
So encouraging. I love it. Kiki, are you available for tours? Or can you go to schools and tell kids that they can do it? Awesome. Other questions or thoughts for our panel? Well, while you're thinking, while you're percolating, I'm wondering if any of our authors would like to share a little passage from their book. Oh, we do have a question. Oh, thank you. Great.
I was just going to ask, what's next? What are you working on that we can maybe see in the future?
What's next? Do you have more book projects in mind?
I have one. It's called ficDon, and it's about a duck that meets the winter maker, the summer maker, the fall maker, and the spring maker. And each season is like its own chapter in its adventure.
When's that coming out?
I think like in a year.
Okay. Stay tuned, everybody. Love it. How about the rest of you? More projects in the works. Did you mean just books or anything? Okay.
Yeah, a feature-length film. No, I have another picture book coming out through Nancy Polson Press as my publisher called Song for a Pony. And it's going to feature a little bit of the story of the Ojibwe horse, Black Lakota pony. It's a connection to me as a Bois, Forte, acDve, but also my family probably came from Black Lakota before that. So there's that. I also just signed a deal with Nick Press for a middle grade chapter book. The title TBD. So both of those will be out in 2027.
We have a bunch of things rolling. Right now, I'm a master's and PhD grad student at University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities here, where I'm continuing to study fire on the landscape with Evan and many other amazing people. And through that, we have a manuscript that's coming out real quick. And we also produced a short film, A Wilderness Act, which has been showing around. It was shown at Minnesota Film Fest. It's going to be coming to the Twin Cities soon, and was just accepted into a couple different places, Fresh Coast Film Fest down in Marquette, Michigan, and then another film fest in Virginia as well. So we have that, and that's all about advocating for the return of fire and what has happened as a result of not having fire for so long. And we have many other things that are happening too, but we haven't yet talked about another book, but I'm sure there'll be one, as well as another film.
We do have a grant in review right now, a proposal to work with Miri, who did the illustrations, Miri Billiard, who is a Fond du Lac direct descendant. She was based in Duluth when we met her for this. She's now at the Twin Cities working on a master's degree in human rights. But she also animates. And so we have a proposal in review to turn this into an animated short, which would be really cool.
Amazing. And is the film that you have right now, is that available more broadly if teachers or librarians or folks wanted to have access to it to kind of partner or to pair with your book?
Yeah, right now, this is also the first film we made. Well, you kind of made a previous film, but so we're learning how that goes too. So right now it's going through festivals, and so we're being pretty careful with how it's shared out. At some point it'll become public domain. But if you are interested, there's a QR code in the back of the book here, and that's got a link to some more about this book, also links to all of the podcasts and scientific papers and other resources that kind of help tell a little bit more about the origin of the conversation around fire, as well as a link to a trailer for the film and information there. So check it out. You can buy the book and use a QR code, but it also works if you just want to take a picture.
And my son, Basile Panik, is actually the one who's the contact if you want to book a showing of the film. My daughter Sophia is out there working at our table selling her art and the books, and so she can always pass along Basile's contact info to be able to book the film and or a panel if you'd like as well.
Fabulous. I hope everyone was taking notes. Yes, we have another question.
Thank you for sharing your stories. My question is, we've heard from authors before whose illustrators are very separate from the process, and wondering if you had a say in that, or does the publisher come into play at all with the illustrator really, I mean, it's the important part of the picture book, you know, along with the words. So do you get any kind of say in that? You talked about, Kiki talked about 2 people that helped you out, and I think Evan, you mentioned it as well. So what is that process like?
So Betsy and Tom, they are the owners of Blackberries and Blueberries Publishing, and they work with some illustrators, and they contact them and they share the story with them and what they make. So I don't have any say in it, but it's okay. But sometimes it's no offense, but sometimes it gets it a little bit wrong, like sometimes. But it's okay because everyone is still learning about it. It's okay because if you've never done it, it's still fine because you're learning about it. And I thought this one, I got a kick out of this one because I went to the Boys and Girls Club, and they were looking at my book. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you published a book!" And then they were looking through it, and then like, online, and they're like, "Wait, why are they throwing a spear? That's how you lose a spear." And I was like, oh, yeah. So I don't know. I was laughing, but that was really good. But it just shows that mistakes are okay.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful growth mindset. I love it.
Yeah, I pitched a couple illustrator ideas to my publisher. So the publisher, Nancy Paulson Press, I worked with the Nancy Paulson of that directly, and I said, she had reached out to me, she's like, do you have any ideas? And she pitched a couple, and I was really insisting, like, it's gotta be a native illustrator. Just A, because like there's gonna be context they're gonna more likely understand, but B, because like I just always am trying to uplift other native creatives. So I pitched a few, and she was like, I don't know, and I pitched another one, like, I don't know if they're available, we'll see, people are available, and then she came to me, like, have you heard of Tara Audibert? And I was like, no. And she said, she did Jojo McCombs, and I'm like, then yes. And, so I was thrilled she came on board, but there was very little interaction between us actually. Like we were on some email chains together, and it was more just Nancy would come to me with like, here's the sketches, what's your feedback? Like maybe this, like okay, and then I get some change sketches later again from Nancy, and then with updates, I'm like this looks good. Tara is asking this question, so there really was very much a separation between us. And I think partially the reason is because creative people just will go on forever, and we'll never be quite happy with how it is. I mean, I read this sometimes, I'm like, oh, I should have said that different. That wasn't what I meant. But it's okay, like Kiki said, like you gotta, eventually it's just gotta be done. So it just kind of helps the process to move along, and it's not uncommon. Other publishers do it differently. But that was my experience with this one, and my upcoming one is shaping up to be similar, but thrilled with how this came out, so I'm sure I'll be happy with the next one.
And ours is also published through Blackberries and Blueberries, but we had quite a different process. We worked directly with Mary through them initially, but then we had quite a few sessions where we would sit down with her, look at the draft images, and we would tweak them as we went, both us and her. And so we would, explain different mindsets to her that matched up with the words, and she would, sort of figure out how the images should look a little bit differently, like the red pines, for example, to make sure that they represented more of red pines versus some sort of made-up tree, I'll say. But to me, that it was, again, my first experience, but it was amazing because it was watching her be creative in front of us as she had her little iPad and would sketch things out and tweak them and then say like this, and we're like, yeah. Like it was so beautiful, and with her being another Anishinaabe person too, and kind of understanding where at least my mind was coming from a cultural aspect, really helped too, because she was very just dialed in with us, and so to me it was magical.
I will also say that we did everything wrong for this book. The way as I have heard, most people approach the book. So we had the story, we actually approached Miri before we had even talked about like the full book, and we're like, hey, what do you think? And by the end of the conversation, she had already sketched a point, like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. And then Tom and Betsy remarked a few times that most books they work on are done 6 months after it started, and we're on like, if you really count from the start, this is year 7 before this thing finally came out. So to your point about all that feedback and all the iterations, but it was really about a year-long intense kind of development. But so as opposed to writing the story and then finding the illustrator, like it was really kind of part of the process moving forward. So yeah, that was our experience.
Sounds like so many different processes. Really depends on the book. Excellent question. We are about at our time. Oh, yep, I'm getting the signal. So if you have more questions for our authors, I hope that you will come and find them out in the Basta Gallery out here. Many of them are set up with tables and books for purchase and conversation. So please join us out there. We do have another panel coming up at 2 to 2:40 back in this space, so we have a little time if you need to get up and stretch and use the restroom or grab a sip of water. So coming back from 2 to 2:40, we have our other authors here with us. So Art Paulson and Marique Moss and Kim Sedavis. So come back and join us for that. Please join me in thanking our panelists.